and had so much endeared and well recommended him to a bishop that at the age of 50 he was provided with a handsome income of £23 a year, which, however, he could not make any great figure with, because he lived in a dear country and was a little encumbered with a wife and 6 children. It was this gentleman who, having, as I have said, observed the singular devotion of young Andrews, had found means to question him concerning several particulars, as how many books there were in the New Testament, which were they, how many chapters they contained, and such like, to all which Mr. Adams privately said he answered much better than Sir Thomas or 2 other neighbouring justices of the peace could probably have done. Mr. Adams was wonderfully solicitous to know at what time and by what opportunity the youth became acquainted with these matters. Joey told him that he had very early learnt to read and write by the goodness of his father, who, though he had not interest enough to get him into a charity school, because a cousin of his father's landlord did not vote on the right side for a church warden in a borough town, yet had been himself at the expense of 6pence a week for his learning. He told him likewise that ever since he was in Sir Thomas's family, he had employed all his hours of leisure in reading good books, that he had read the Bible, The Whole Duty of Man, and Thomas à Kempis. The curate, surprised to find such instances of industry and application in a young man who had never met with the least encouragement, asked him if he did not extremely regret the wants of a liberal education, and the not having been born of parents who might have indulged his talents and desire of knowledge. To which he answered, he hoped he had profited somewhat better from the books he had read than to lament his condition in the world, that for his part he was perfectly content with the state to which he was called, that he should endeavour to improve his talent, which was all required of him, but did not repine at his own lot, nor envy those of his betters. "Well said, my lad," replied the curate, "and I wish some who have read many more good books, nay, and some who have written good books themselves, had profited so much by them." Adams had no nearer access to Sir Thomas or my lady than through the waiting gentlewoman, for Sir Thomas was too apt to estimate men merely by their dress or fortune, and my lady was a woman of gaiety who had been blessed with a town education and never spoke of any of her country neighbours by any other appellation than that of the brutes. They both regarded the curate as a kind of domestic only, belonging to the parson of the parish. Mrs. Slipslop, the waiting gentlewoman, being herself the daughter of a curate, preserved some respect for Adams. She professed great regard for his learning, and would frequently dispute with him on points of theology, but always insisted on a deference to be paid to her understanding, as she had been frequently at London, and knew more of the world than a country parson could pretend to. She had in these disputes a particular advantage over Adams, for she was a mighty affecter of hard words, which she used in such a manner that the parson, who durst not offend her by calling her words in question, was frequently at some loss to guess her meaning, and would have been less puzzled by an Arabian manuscript. Adams therefore took an opportunity one day, after a pretty long discourse with her on the essence, or as she pleased to term it, the incense, of matter, to mention the case of young Andrews, desiring her to recommend him to her lady as a youth very susceptible of learning, and one whose instruction in Latin he would himself undertake, by which means he might be qualified for a higher station than that of a footman, and added she knew it was in his master's power easily to provide for him in a better manner. He therefore desired that the boy might be left behind under his care. "La, Mr. Adams," said Mrs. Slipslop, "do you think my lady will suffer any preambles about any such matter? She is going to London very concisely, and I am confidious would not leave Joey behind her on any account. For he is one of the genteelest young fellows you may see in a summer's day, and I am confidious she would as soon think of parting with a pair of her grey mares, for she values herself as much on one as the other." At which words her lady's bell rung, and Mr. Adams was forced to retire, nor could he gain a second opportunity with her before their London journey, which happened a few days afterwards. No sooner was young Andrews arrived at London than he began to scrape an acquaintance with his party-coloured brethren, who endeavoured to make him despise his former course of life. His hair was cut after the newest fashion, and became his chief care. He went abroad with it all the morning in papers, and dressed it out in the afternoon. They could not, however, teach him to game, swear, drink, nor any other genteel vice the town